Hello and welcome everybody. So today I want to talk about failure and conviction. What's the difference? What's going on? So how do we know we actually failed in something at life? We've all tried stuff that didn't work out and this and that, went on to the next thing. You know, I read a story one time about the inventor of the light bulb, and for some reason I think it was Thomas Edison. If not, correct me in the comments, I'm sorry. But when he was inventing the light bulb, he had tried like over 800 times before he finally found the correct way to do it. And on this interview, the person interviewing was like, well, you sat here and failed over 800 times trying to get this done and all this. And he looked at the interviewer and said, no, I didn't fail. I just found 800 and something ways that didn't work. So in other words, really, we haven't actually failed until we completely give up and walk away. Other than that, like I say, I'm always saying this is an eternal game. Eventually you're going to get it right, but it goes back to the conviction, to the faith, to the manifest. In other words, in your mind, if you know you can get this thing accomplished, it's a whole different story because you have the knowing. In other words, I almost hate to use the word faith sometimes because it can seem like it can mean so many different things, but the conviction and the knowing is the faith part. That anything that you ask for that you believe you will receive. And like when it comes to failure, it's like we'll start stuff, but in the back of our mind, we already kind of know it's not going to work. And so like in the back of our mind, we've already got the backup story and all this. And, well, if I'd have just been there 1 week sooner, or if I could have just invested my money, or, had I not talked to this guy or that, all that stuff adds up. And, not only that, as you're manifesting and praying or all that kind of stuff in life, we want to keep it to ourselves, because what happens if you tell even close family, friends, or whoever, what they're really going to do is just further reinforce any beliefs that you might have that you can't get it done. In other words, so very few times people will be like, yeah, it's amazing, you can do it, and you're going to make millions of dollars and you'll have an amazing life. Very few people are like that. So just another thing to keep in mind, hold your vision, hold the conviction and the knowing that it's done. Live like it's already complete. In other words, this is what all the gurus teach, kind of like living in the end, in other words. But I love y'all. We'll see you on the next one.